I am Bryce Newberger, and this is the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. Act 2, From the Ashes, Rise. Chapter 21. Water drops echoed through the dark corridor. Whether it was dropping just out of sight or miles away, Cal wasn't sure. Everything seemed to reverberate ages deep into the endless dark of his journey. The stranger walked ahead of him, seemingly indifferent to Cal if he followed or not. His figure was indistinguishable in the drab gray black that encompassed everything. The stranger was the embodiment of uncertainty that led Cal towards the unknown. Any of his questions were answered with silence. If it wasn't for the faintest sound of footfalls next to his, Cal would have wondered if there was anyone even there at all. Light finally broke at the end of the tunnel, where a grated gate door was locked to keep unwanted interlopers out of the secret passage. Dazon collapsed against the side of the gate and drank in the sunlight. His battered body was riddled with wounds and had ached to the point where, for the last hour, he had operated merely on willpower alone. Now that they were far enough from the town and securely locked behind a gate, he could focus on healing himself. The boy pressed his face against the gate and peered out into the horizon of the endless forest. "Where are we?" Dazon reached into one of the many unassuming pouches strapped to his side and retrieved a small rod of gauze. Deciding that the natural sunlight wasn't enough, he snapped to cause a small puff of flame to jump from his finger to a mounted wall sconce. The torch flickered to life and gave a brighter illumination. Only then did Cal notice the torches lined the walls far into the darkness. "There were torches the whole time?" Cal asked with unrestrained exasperation. Paying Cal no mind, Dazon threaded his needle and pierced the puffy loose flesh around his wound. Cal winced but couldn't look away. "What are you doing?" Dazon finished closing and dressing his gashes, then pulled out a thin sleeping roll and set it in the middle of the walkway. "Get some sleep," his dark, scruffy voice said to Cal, indicating for the boy to use his roll. "What's going on?" Cal asked, but Dazon was already reclined with his eyes closed. Obediently, Cal placed himself into the sleeping arrangement. It was smelly, itchy, and altogether still too thin to supply any real warmth. Cal just laid there, staring at the torch. And then he began to cry. Not a whiny pout that seeks attention, not a loud wail that indicated physical pain. No, this was a broken, silent sniffle. It was the quiet sobs of a lost and lonely child who had suffered the epitome of loss. When it felt like Cal had no tears left to cry, he finally found rest. Bryn forced himself to rise from the ground. All around him the town had been reduced to rubble. Flames capped the tips of the debris. Ada looked on in horror as she held the other children tight to her. Eldrich, Ada, and Teddy quaked in fear as their father faced the naked and blind terror. Bryn rushed in and stuck his sword into the monster's gut. He locked eyes with the dead gray pupils right as they exploded into fire and death. The whole scene erupted into the screams of Cal's burning, dying family. When the fire went out, Cal was there, swimming in a sea of darkness. Somewhere near him, he could hear a frantic splashing approaching. "Who's there?" he demanded. An eerie, quiet voice called out. "Help me. Help me. Help me!" Cal awoke in a cold sweat. He had sat up and was still facing the darkness of the tunnel, uncertain if he was still sleeping or awake. The darkness confused him further by calling out ever so quietly, "Help me." Cal retreated back under his cover and squeezed his eyes shut. The tears came back and streamed down his cheek freely. He wept in fear. Then he wept with loss. Then he just wept as he fell into a deep, tormented sleep once more. He would repeat this process many times to come. Dazon opened his eyes groggily and was surprised to see Twilight staring back at him through the trees. He had slept much too long. He got to his feet and stretched his limbs. There were a few cracks and pops as cartilage protested his movement, then remembered its place. Kicking the boy hard on the foot, he awakened him with a harsh jolt. The boy looked up at him with red, puffy, swollen eyes that blinked repeatedly. Dazon was unaffected by the boy's apparent troubled sleep. "It will be dark soon. Gather some firewood and start a fire before I return if you wish to eat." "What about you?" Cal inquired, feeling a bit attached to the companion. "Hunt." With that, Dazon popped open the gate and was off in a flash. Cal looked off into the forest for a few minutes, uncertain where to begin. He took his first step out of the tunnel and set foot off the stone onto the dirt. It was his first step completely on his own. His stomach grumbled, and he noticed the light was fading fast. Cal figured he had better gather wood quick if he wanted to eat. Dazon had set off into the forest looking for quarry, something light yet meaty that wouldn't leave any bones or mess behind, in the off chance they were to be tracked. Currently below him were a set of small hoof tracks that led north. He followed them only for a moment before they seemed to become human footprints. Dazon blinked twice, then rubbed his tired eyes, but the tracks remained human. The last set led to a pair of boots. His eyes followed them upwards to Frederick, his dead ex-apprentice. "Master Dazon, why did you kill me?" Dazon ignored the apparition and looked hard through the ghost for signs of the hoof tracks. Frederick's specter spoke again. "I know you considered me your son. How could you turn on me so easy?" At that, Dazon stood up and thrust an accusatory finger at the vision, though he spoke in hushed tones as if the forest denizens would consider his madness should they hear him. "You betrayed yourself!" The ghost replied, "Is that pitiful excuse enough to clear your conscience?" Dazon let out a sigh and regained his composure. "Conscience is weakness. There is only the mission." He then threw a dagger at Frederick's chest. The weapon passed through him and struck into the ground with a meaty squish and the squeal of a dying jackalope siren. This small hoofed rabbit with antlers was considered a myth by most. It masked its presence by causing predators to experience delusional visions. Instantly, the dead apprentice faded away. Dazon walked over to the dying animal that had caused the psychic confusion and broke its neck. "Crag, I hate these things." He spoke to no one but himself. Cal dumped a large bundle of sticks and logs onto the floor and arranged them into a circle for an impromptu fire pit. He had finished right as the last moments of light were fading away. Now all he had to do was drop the torch in the middle. He turned towards the sconce but frowned when he found it smoldering and smoking. There was heat, but no fire. Cal retrieved it anyways and placed it in the center, hoping it would just flare back to life. Looking at the problem pit with consternation, Cal remembered seeing Dazon snap the torch to life. He thought back to the doorknob, the prison cell, and how the building collapsed over him when he needed it to. With his epiphany, he snapped his fingers at the fire, almost shouting, "Aha!" as he did it. Nothing happened. "Why isn't the fire going?" asked Dazon as he returned with a small antlered corpse. "I couldn't start it," Cal answered in depression. Dazon threw the meat down, then bent over and took a round stick from the middle of the pile. Using his two hands, he rolled them back and forth to spin the twig rapidly. Smoke began to work around the base of his project. "Can't you just use magic?" Cal inquired, though it wasn't really a question. A small flame flickered to life. Dazon looked up at Cal. "Magic?" he said as if it were the most inane thing he had heard. "There is no such thing." He blew out the tiny fire and tossed a stick to Cal. "Your turn." Thank you for listening. I'm Bryce Newberger, and this has been the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. If you enjoyed what you heard and you'd like to purchase the full book, then either look up New Books on the Google Play Bookstore, NEU Books, or simply click the link in the description. The book is only $5, and I appreciate your support.